Welcome to the Dire Wolf Show, where we believe that America is exceptional and that our constitutional rights should never be infringed. I am Dire Wolf. On our show, we bring you the truth and debunk fake news. If you love laughing at the insanity of the regressive left, sit back and relax. Boy, do I have a show for you.
Maybe. Dire, you're live.
What? Oh, did you not hear me?
No,
welcome back.
Muted.
Welcome back, Wolfpack. Dire Wolf here for another Dire Discusses on YouTube, where speech is not free and the truth is demonetized. So this video has no hope, but jokes on them. The entire channel is demonetized. Ha! Jokes on you. Anyway, so along with me is my co-host and producer, Fox.
Hello. How are you tonight?
Not the Fox News Network,
We are
but
much
just
better than
that. Still more ratings. Oh, we got a lemon from Catman9222. Thank you very much for that. We're actually getting a bit of a chest together. We got 65.6 Lino in there, so we should probably cash out at the end of the stream.
You like that chest, Dire?
I do like chest. I do fixate on the chest quite a bit.
Yes.
So just ask my wife. So today's topic is going to be the deal with Syria. There's a lot going on with Syria. We've been in conflict there for a long time. How many years now? Has it been 3? It's 3 years.
I think 1400.
Okay, the most recent war, and yes, off. We've been dating with conflict in Syria for a long time now.
Okay.
And even when we're not there, it's dating other people's conflicts. So the whole region is a mess of tribes and nations that all hate each other and are vying for power. So conflict is a way of life. But moving on, the most recent situation is we've been in war there. We were supporting rebels that were trying to unseat Assad, as well as trying to defeat ISIS at the same time. Russia has been involved, setting up anti-air defenses and supporting the Assad government. Turkey's also involved. The Kurds are involved. Turkey hates the Kurds. The Kurds don't like the Syrian government. The Syrian government doesn't like the Kurds, and the Kurds are kind of in the middle of being hated by everybody. But they hate but the Kurds but Turkey also hates Syria more, and vice versa.
And for some reason, the entire Western world has decided that this is America's problem.
Yes. So I'll get into more why the American government has historically, and so has the European governments historically believed that we had a part in this conflict and always have and always will. That's why they have that opinion. I'll explain later. But let's go over what today's story is about first. So Trump pulled troops out of Syria, the northern part of Syria. We're going to discuss what happened, what actually happened, what it means, and how people reacted to it. So that means we're going to start off with the timeline of events.
All right. So last Saturday, Trump decided late last Saturday to remove the roughly 1,000 troops that are in northern Syria in the areas that are held by the Kurds, a group of people you've probably heard quite a lot about recently, who were a large primary ally in the conflict in Syria with ISIS and just kind of all the stuff that's been going on in northern Syria over there.
Yeah, I know it's going to be kind of confusing because there's like 15 different tribes. The U.S. and the Kurds allied with some tribes, whereas the Russia and the Syrian government allied with other tribes. And we were against Russia and the Syrian government, but the Russia and the Syrian government and us and the Kurds were all allied against ISIS. So we'd be fighting side by side and then later on firing at each other.
There was this one really cute time where we were in northern Syria fighting alongside, I think, one group of Iraqis with against ISIS. And then in southern Syria at the same time, we were fighting against the same Iraqis with Saudi Arabia, I believe. And that's how beautifully complicated it is over there.
Yeah. One funny example I remember from that Benghazi movie. I forgot what it was. But it gave a example of something that is actually true, where the enemy was about to attack, and our allies warned us because they got a cell phone call from the enemy general saying that they're going to attack. It's like, yes, they know each other. The friendly and enemy generals, they know each other. They fought on the same side and against each other multiple times.
Well, your allyship over there is more based off what is your GPS coordinates, not really based off who do you represent. Like, and that's kind of the problem too. It's very, very territorial, and that's why, yeah, I was saying, it depends on which area you're at. You could be fighting the same person in the south that you're allied with in the north, and I guess everybody just agrees that that's cool. I guess I don't know.
So a few of the motives of the different groups involved here. The Kurds, they're fighting for independence against a bunch of people who believe they don't exist. Several different countries in the area don't acknowledge them as being a government. And then we have Assad, who's just simply fighting to remain in power. And then we have the Turks, who are the Turks, who are fighting because they want to secure their border. They've been in conflict with the Kurds, which are on the northern border of Syria and the southern border of Turkey, and they have been in conflict for a long time, decades. And there's been a lot of terrorist attacks coming across that border. So Turkey wants to take 50 kilometers off of their border as a safe zone, basically have it under military control, and prevent the terrorists, that the people they perceive as being terrorists, as being able to have a foothold right on their border, and that prevents people from being able to fire rockets and mortars into Turkey. And then Russia and the U.S., for them and for us, is a war of influence. The reason why we're there is because we want to have influence in the region. We want to have ability to have military bases there. We want to be able to have the ability there to respond to conflicts and to try to maintain order to prevent conflict, and also put in power governments that are pro-American, pro-Western. Now, I'm not justifying this. I'm saying that is the reason why they've done this. That's the reason why we're there. And the reason why we want influence and military power in the region is because this region greatly affects the power production of Europe. Europe survives off the oil produced in this region, and their economies and their societies could collapse with instability in this region. So they have a military necessity and a economic necessity for there to be influence in this region. We as Americans don't really have that need because we are energy independent as of recently. Thank you, Trump. But we do suffer economically if Europe suffers economically, because our economies are affected. So that's one reason, whether you agree with it or not, we are there because we want influence to secure our economy.
Yeah, so it's a reason. It's up to you guys whether or not you think it's a good reason, but it is a reason why.
If you don't like that reason, vote for people who disagree with it. I am anti-war. I don't think that. So we have enough influence in nearby areas. I don't think that putting our soldiers in a never-ending war, a war that has no victory potential, where we're basically there to get shot at and to be a buffer between two warring groups or multiple warring groups, I don't think that's a fair trade for the influence they're trying to buy. How about we focus on making ourselves not need them?
I could not agree more. I just tossed up for everybody else on stream. I tossed you guys up a map of the region that we're talking about, and we've got a zoomed in one. Right now it's kind of zoomed out. You got Syria and Turkey in the middle there. Just kind of give you guys an idea of where in the world we're talking about, because that's probably one of the biggest problems with this current conflict is you've got groups of people that most Americans haven't you've barely heard of them. You don't have any really familiarity with who they are or what they represent. And this America's geography is not very we're not very good at geography. So this kind of gives you an idea of where we're at. So one of the primary strategies that Turkey has when discussing with the rest of Europe and justifying what they're doing in Syria and with the Kurds is that they are kind of the buffer, the cork that is keeping the flood of Syrian refugees in Syria. And they could, and I believe Erdogan has specifically threatened that he will just highway all the Syrian refugees right through Turkey, right through Istanbul, right into Europe. And so that is probably another reason why Europe is, the EU is a little tepid, and a lot of our European NATO allies and the UN, they're pretty tepid on.
Did you hear what NATO's response was to all this?
Oh, NATO said something?
NATO put out an official statement, I believe it was this morning, but this is why we know that NATO's going to do jack shit. Their response was asking Turkey in their military offensive to show restraint and use only proportional force.
Okay.
Proportional force. So basically, don't hit them too hard.
Was but a love tap. How much money did that cost the American taxpayer? Jesus.
I have no idea. Way too much.
Yeah. And again, I've said this multiple times. It'd be crazy if there was some kind of international body of collective nations, maybe a league of them, perhaps a united force of nations, the United Nations force. What if we called it that? And all these big nations got together and they helped out when there was some sort of big conflict in the world and some kind of humanitarian crisis. Man, it would just be amazing if there was some kind of group that did that.
If only something like that existed.
We could even headquarter them in New York. I'd be willing to give them some real estate for that if they were effective.
So what does Secretary of Defense have to say about this?
So Secretary of Defense, he said, quote, "We have American forces likely caught between two opposing advancing armies." That would be, Turkey, Russia, and Kurds?
So it would be the Syrians and the Turkish, I guess.
Okay. So we got two opposing advancing armies, and it's a very untenable situation. I spoke with the president last night after discussing with the rest of the national security team, and he directed that we should begin deliberate withdrawal of forces from northern Syria.
So basically, the Turks have been pushing for the U.S. to allow them to go and take Kurdish territory since the beginning of the conflict. It's been their goal for a long time. They're hoping to use this conflict as a reason to do it, and the U.S. has been saying no. Well, Turks have finally got to the point before we pulled our troops over and said, I don't care what the U.S. says. We're doing it anyways. And that means that we have U.S. troops that are about to be with the allies that they're mixed in with. Like, they're not in their own units. They're mixed in with Kurdish troops, right? Mm-hmm. So those are going to be going up against one of our allies of NATO. So our guys would be forced into conflict against an ally. And then on the other side, we have an enemy we've been fighting against also moving in. So we would be stuck with a very small number of troops, no supply chain, no way to plus up and get our army in there. And if we did bring an army in there, a larger army to actually fight off such the size of army we're going against, it would require us to go into war against an ally.
Yeah, and I know we tend to forget this because the last 2 decades we've kind of tossed out what it means to have a proper official war. Those kind of official channels have gotten a little muddy the last during at least the bulk of the audience during our lifetime. It's been a little bit more confusing, not as deliberate as it used to be throughout history. And so one of the things that everybody may forget, and I believe Congress has forgotten this too, is that Trump cannot go to war on his own. He's the president. He can control the armies when we're at war, but he can't declare it himself. So that would have to be Congress. So I think it's really rich of Congress to be and especially the Democrats, to be wanting him to stay there and corner himself into a situation where he will be forced into some kind of open conflict with somebody who's technically an ally. And, that being forced into open conflict is what some people might refer to as a war. And since Congress hasn't declared war on Turkey or Russia or Syria or the Kurds, that would have been an illegal war. And Congress is actually under Article 1, Section 8, Clause 11 of the Constitution. That is where Congress gets the power to declare war. And so this week they, after Trump decided that he was going to pull troops out, Congress wasted all of their time as they typically do. And they passed a resolution, and it got massive bipartisan support. I think it was like 350 votes, so there was a lot of Republicans in there too. They passed a resolution condemning the Syria pullout. And again, Congress has the power to declare war.
Dumb.
So basically, instead of passing a resolution to condemn Trump for not positioning himself to get into an illegal war, they could have just as easily held the same vote to declare war on Turkey, I guess if that's what they wanted.
Okay.
And then Trump would have had the authorization to deploy troops against them. If they really wanted a war that badly, they could have.
Okay, you got to zoom in. I want to show you how stupid what they're suggesting is. Can you zoom in just a little closer to...
Is this the right? Do you want that map?
Not really. I wanted to. That's fine. Okay, so go to the previous map. Everyone can see it.
Let's go back to Google Maps.
Yeah, the way we get troops and air support and to that region is through Turkey giving us airspace, right? If Turkey is now the enemy, how do we resupply? Are we supposed to come through the south, where Syria, who we're also at war with, has Russian aerial defenses? Are we supposed to then knock out all of the Syrian government's aerial defenses, which, by the way, are the most advanced ones that Russia has at their disposal, which are effective out to a undisclosed but big range? We'd be going to, just to resupply the troops that are currently on the ground, it would require such a huge military operation that would be us going to war. And then, we'd be going to war, not with just Turkey or Syria. Russia's there. We'd be taking military action directly against Russian troops and installations. So if you want us to stay there, you are asking us to go into a potential near-peer conflict. Do you know what that means? With nuclear weapons, by the way.
The Democrats have done this before. They, I believe it was towards the end of the Obama administration, they had held hearings with, I believe it was over Aleppo, perhaps, but the Democrat Congress wanted the military to create a, I forget what it's called, but they wanted to lock down the airspace. That's what it was. And the generals were saying, if we lock down the airspace, dude, there's no way to do that without going to war with Russia. And they were like, we want you to lock down the airspace. He's like, are you going to declare war? They're like, no. We want you to lock down the airspace. I can't lock down the airspace unless you declare war. It's the same kind of thing here, where they want to have it both ways, and they really just want it to be a political stunt. Because I really don't think that anybody, I don't think that any of the Democrats actually give a damn about any of this. They just want it to be as complicated as possible for Trump.
Yes. So then there was a commentator on CNN who was posted as some sort of expert on something, but from what I'm about to tell you as a quote, you'll realize he was an expert in just being an idiot. But so he said that Trump should have left our troops there and should have had our 1,000 some odd troops that were in the northern Syrian border, with the Kurds, be along the border as a tripwire. And even the CNN host said, so you want our troops to get shot at or be in conflict with the Turkish people, Turkish military, and you're willing to sacrifice them to have them as be like a political barrier that Turkey would have to cross. Like it would be costly politically for them to kill American troops.
And the answer to that, I'm sure, was yes. I'm not sure.
Yes, it was yes. He's like, yes, our troops are a tripwire. We're a political trap that they have to cross. And what he means by that is he's okay with American troops being sacrificed for the political means. Fuck off.
Why don't we go set up a consulate there, and we'll come rescue him just like Benghazi. And that guy sounds like he'd be a great ambassador over there.
By himself, that'd be a great idea.
So am I quiet, audience? I heard somebody in chat said I was quiet. I can boost my gain if I need to. So let me know in chat if I'm quiet.
Yeah, so you should be just sacrificing American troops. You should be putting them into a conflict where they can win, where there's an actual hope of actually fighting and winning, not them just being there to be sacrificed for your political means. That I know some people do that in their policy, but that he is outright said that, it was even more disgusting. But that we have no business being there just to die, just to be shot at, right? If other countries want to stabilize that region, if Russia, which by the way, Russia seems like they want to stabilize that region, they just want it to be stabilized with Assad in power.
That's such a right? Who did you say said that? That was one of the commentators, or were they interviewing somebody?
It was a commentator. The actual CNN interview pushed back, like, so you're saying
that's
leave
so
American troops die?
That's such a disconnect between. There's something different about America as opposed to every other country throughout history and mostly contemporary. And we're not this dictator or empire, where we're sending off people at an emperor's will, emperor's whim. Our military is our peers. It's our fellow citizens, and to talk about them like that's so outrageous, and just that's not what the military is there for. You guys are not a slave army to throw against the rocks. It's your peers, and I just don't understand. Well, I do understand it, but I can't empathize with that position of not being able to grasp the concept of the military is not just your plaything to send off to die. It is your peers. It is your fellow citizens.
We are a highly trained professional force, the best military in the world, and you do not just you use us to defend our country and its legitimate interest. You don't just sacrifice us just for your political gain, just to hurt Trump. Which, by the way, that's what this is about. They want to sacrifice 1,000 soldiers just to make Trump look bad. If Trump had left the troops there to be embroiled in this conflict where there's an enemy on both sides and they have no business there and no victory to be had, no ability to be resupplied, had they died, they would have blamed Trump for that. So fuck them. Their moral outrage here is meaningless because anything Trump does, no matter how good or bad, it will always be wrong.
Orange man bad. Orange man bad.
So Turkey has been, like I said, pressing the U.S. since the war began to take control of the northern Syrian area for the reason so that they could have that safe zone, as well as once they got that safe zone and they kicked out millions of the Kurdish who are currently living there, they want to then move in Syrian refugees that they've collected since the conflict started, to about 2 million Syrian refugees, and move them into that safe zone. So that's what Turkey's goals are. And they see the Turkish people as being a terrorist group or being strongly affiliated with or run by a government that is affiliated with terrorist groups that are constantly attacking the Turkish people. And that's why they are motivated to do this, right or wrong.
It gets hard too because you've got, as I was saying earlier, the general American population hardly knows where this is at. They barely have ever heard of these groups of people. I'm no expert on Turkish politics. I know the gist of it, and I certainly have absolutely no idea what the difference between Kurds and ISIS is and their belief system. I've been told that there is a difference, but
There is.
it's so you get the media in here saying, oh well, it's just like this, and the Turkey says it's like this, so it must be like that, or the Kurds say it's like this, so it must be like that, or Trump said it's this, so it must be the opposite, and they make these like really broad sweeping positions, and their solution to these really broad definitions that they've just laid out that they have not backed up at all. I mean, God, it'd be really great if instead of spending 23 hours on Trump derangement stuff, CNN. Maybe they could spend an hour doing a history lesson and go through some of the history of this area so that people have some context for what the hell is going on over there. Because they're giving us zero context for what the current situation is, and then we're just supposed to take their word for it that these guys are bad and these guys are good. There's no gray area here, and the solution is we need to do whatever the opposite of Trump, whatever Trump's saying. That's what their proposed solution is. And it's not. It's very frustrating trying to get a hold of it because I know I'm at least I at least am equipped mentally to attempt to try and understand some of this stuff, and it's really dense.
So the Kurds are considered generally the good guys in this because they are the oppressed minority who the countries in the area don't recognize their independence.
That sounds like critical theory crap.
And they're fighting for independence, but more importantly, they've been the ally to the U.S. They've helped us fight our wars in the area, so that's why they're considered the good guys. But the fact is, of the 20 to 35 million Kurds in the area, some are terrorists because they actually commit terrorist acts, and some are good, some are bad. There's no all good, all bad, but they are born in a culture like all the groups in the area that are very sectarian. They're born in violence. They live a very dangerous and violent lifestyle because that's the culture of the area, right? The place has been in conflict for generations and generations upon generations, right?
Yeah.
So every side has been both the perpetrator and the victim of violence, right? Some are worse than others, and as far as I'm concerned, the Kurds, though they've been the victim of attack from all sides, what makes them good to American politicians is that they've been our ally militarily.
Yeah, and that gets into a philosophical discussion that's not resolvable. Of is the enemy of my enemy my friend? And that's not something we'll resolve tonight.
What it boils down to is if they're good or bad, is this our fight? If we fight here, what do we gain? Nothing.
Yeah. So and that's the real question of it too. And so there was a lot of discussion as to pointing fingers at Trump, that Trump screwed this whole thing up. It was very screwed up, but nobody could have screwed it up like Trump did. It's like, all right, well, let's stop pretending that this whole conflict is 5 minutes old. It's not broken because anything Trump did. It's not broken necessarily for anything Obama did. It's not broken for anything Bush did. It's broken because they've been operating under largely in the area, multiple competing factions of medieval theological death cults trying for 1,400 years to take over little areas of this country. And some people aren't always in that, but they've had enough of that throughout the area for thousands of years.
Yeah.
And it's for anybody in the media, if you guys are listening to anybody commentating or you catch any clips on CNN or you see a tweet and somebody says it's this reason and that reason is not a 14,000-year-old or 1,400-year-old reason, they are lying to you.
Yeah. And, that's not to say that there's nothing we can do about that region, right? What Trump did was he's like, okay, there's no point for our soldiers to be there, but we still have a huge economy that has a lot of influence around the world, and we can negotiate, we can put sanctions on, and we can encourage stability, but it's not our fight. Adding one more faction, our faction, to a group of like 20 some odd warring factions is not going to bring peace.
Yeah. Well, and that's the other thing too. So as we've said a few times, the Kurds are a broad name for an ethnic group, but within that group there's sub tribes, and they've all got their own kind of individual beliefs, and they're more united on their race than they are on their ideology, and they're just one of many other subgroups all throughout the area. It's that's another thing the media has been doing, is they've been painting it as it's pretty black and white. There's there's three major players, and Trump's in Putin's back pocket because of that, but it's a lot more complicated than that on the ground. And again, anybody who's trying to say that it's simple, they're also lying to you.
Right. Anyways, that's your section.
I scrolled away from it. You want to highlight it for me? There we go. All right. So as soon as the U.S. pulled out, Turkey's very large army started attacking the Kurds, like basically immediately. They attacked them with airstrikes, artillery, and a vastly larger, and I'm guessing better equipped ground force.
Yep.
The Turkish army size is the 13th largest globally, with 355,000 active duty soldiers, whereas the Kurdish militias count in the 20 to 30,000, so about 10 to 1 there. They're less trained and less equipped fighters. And within hours of the U.S. withdrawal, the Kurds began to negotiate support from Russia and the Syrian army, which I believe they were rather successful in getting the Syrian, the main part of Syria, to pick up some common cause with them. And Tetris Freak sent us a lemon. Thank you very much, Tetris Freak.
Thank you. So yeah, and it showed that we actually they didn't need us. They immediately had Russia and the Syrian government willing to fight back against Turkey because they had a common enemy. Like before, the Kurds were fighting with the Syrian government, but now they're fighting together against the Turks, right? So they didn't need us there. The Turks have already got involved and helped stop the Syrian government has already got involved and helped stop the Turkish advance. On Monday, Trump.
I don't know if I like the fact that it took. Let's go to war with Turkey for like Syria to like, okay, let's hang out with the Kurds and let's bond over that. I don't know if that's necessarily like a great thing to bond over, but
no.
if this is gonna ever be solved, if there's ever to be any progress on this whatsoever, it has to come from the people in the region. So at minimum, I think allies forming within the region for whatever reason is a step in the right direction.
The allies in that area are very fickle. They come and go from day to day, from depending on what mile marker you're on, your friends or not. So on Monday, Trump redeployed the troops being pulled out of northern Syria to other areas in the region. So we're at net zero here. They may have been pulled out of northern Syria because they were in direct danger of being sandwiched between two enemies, but they aren't back home. That's an important distinction.
Yeah, so I also really did not like that. That was kind of like the shell game with Trump there. It was, we're pulling out. We're pulling the troops back home. Campaign promise kept. Promise made, promise kept. And it's, we're pulling the troops out. And you're not bringing them back home. It's not really pulling the troops out. We just shuffled them around about 1,000 miles south. And it's not a... For all the things that this was supposed to be, it's not really anything. It's such a cluster because it wasn't really true that we were pulling out, and then it wasn't true that when we pulled out that we really needed to stay, and it's just everything is so many layers.
All you can talk about is money and fairy tales of eternal economic growth.
I forgot about that.
Remember Greta? That was like 1,000 internet years ago. Let's see. It
still applies though.
Yeah, what did someone say? Slowpoke has donated $2. The Middle East has been burning for thousands upon thousands of years, so something like this makes the media wet in their pants because they got a war to blame. How do I make it bigger?
I mean, the Middle East hasn't been on fire for thousands of thousands.
Before Islam got there, I mean, they still had their own. They still had a lot of crap going on there, biblically speaking.
But Islam was created about how many years ago?
About 1400.
Yeah, about 14 years. So I mean, it's not thousands upon thousands, but definitely been a long time. I'll give you that.
Well, I no, but I mean before them, I mean the area was not at peace before Islam got there.
Oh, of
It's
course
still.
not. Of course.
How do I find the? How do I read the rest of his chat? I can't find the.
I can
Is
find
it
it for you.
there?
I will pull it up. I can't describe it to you because I'm not looking at your
I know
OBS.
I've seen it before. I just
It
don't
is
know.
on your OBS. It's just one of the screens. You just got to select on the left side.
Yeah, I
But-
clicked through all of them and I could not.
I don't know if it's the top or the bottom one.
Should I click
Sorts-
log out? No, not recommended.
No. I would not recommend that.
Darius like, please don't.
Not again.
You said you wouldn't. Yeah. So, where were we at?
I think we're talking about Syria.
Oh God, still, it's
No.
not over yet.
We're here.
All right. So on Monday, Trump publicly told Turkey to stop the invasion, threatening deliberate sanctions, and he sent Vice President Mike Pence and National Security Advisor Robert O'Brien, I almost wrote that Beto O'Rourke, to negotiate a ceasefire. And is that the letter that he sent too? Or that was last week. Do you want to read that letter? Is this the appropriate time for that?
Sure. Where's the letter at?
I will. It's a Twitter photo that I will send you.
While you're doing it, I will read what Slowpoke said.
Okay.
He said, from Slowpoke, the Middle East has been burning for thousands upon thousands of years. So something like this makes the media wet their pants because they got a war. I can blame Trump for it. Well, to them, that's just Tuesday.
So, who wants to have Dyer read scary ghost stories on Halloween with that voice?
That's not the scary voice.
Drop some diamonds, and Dyer and I'll do a little. We'll do a little stage play with for Halloween.
Okay, I'll do that in the entire show in that voice. I don't think you'd like that though. If you get drop some diamonds.
I don't know. We got a weird audience. I'm sure they'd like it.
They like Director Arcater, right? So I guess
What are you talking about? That's just Arcater's voice.
that's his Arcater's voice. It's definitely not.
You would
Playing it up.
You're not implying that he's a character.
I would not imply that is a character he's playing. That's absolutely how he dresses every day.
So, all right, so this was a letter what Dyer is about to read that Trump sent to Erdogan last Wednesday, I believe. Yes, and it is this letter has been getting a lot of media attention today because, well, Dyer, why don't you read it and we'll get a feel for why this letter caught so much interest.
I'm still looking at a map. Where is this?
Oh, I sent it to you on Skype.
Oh, there it is. Popped up there. Thank you. I guess I
Oh,
can look on Skype. Get closer, bigger.
Yeah, you probably want it bigger.
I do like it big.
That's why you got me as a co-host. It's my ego.
Inflating as we speak.
Yes.
The ego, I mean, nothing else.
Why don't you read the letter?
All right. His Excellency, Erdogan, President of the Republic of Turkey. Dear Mr. President.
Because they're a republic.
Apparently.
I don't believe that.
I need to make this closer. This is way too far away from me.
Me or you?
And it was on my other screen, and then the screen is physically far away from me. So, dear Mr. President, let's work out a good deal. You don't want to be responsible for slaughtering thousands of people, and I don't want to be responsible for destroying the Turkish economy, and I will. I've already given you a little sample of, with respect to Pastor Bruce Bronson. Pastor Bronson. Who the hell?
Oh, that was one of the Turkish officials. Early last week, there was a lot of very specific Turkish officials in America that got like all of their bank accounts locked down. A lot of sanctions on them. They had a lot of business deals that were getting held up, and so that was where it started. And then this is Trump saying that he is going to broaden that to the rest of the country.
I apologize apologize. I started off with a more respectful tone when he's obviously threatening this guy.
Oh yeah. Well, yeah.
So, I have worked hard to solve some of your problems. Don't let the world down. You can make a great deal. General Malzoom is willing to negotiate with you, and he is willing to make concessions that they would never have made in the past. I am confidentially enclosing a copy of his letter to me.
So General Mazom is, I believe, one of the Kurdish generals, and the letter is a letter that he sent to Trump in confidence, and now Trump is just forwarding it to their enemy.
Great. That's great. Sharing phone calls now no longer an issue. History will look upon you favorably if you get this done the right, humane way. It will look upon you forever as the devil if good things don't happen. Jeez, the way he speaks, like he writes the same way he speaks. He obviously wrote this. Yeah. Don't be a tough guy. Don't be a fool.
With an exclamation point.
I will call you later. Oh my god.
So Dyer, everything that happened today, which we're about to get into the ceasefire that was declared today. This was the groundwork for that ceasefire.
Why did he send Pence and the director of the Secretary of Defense if he's going to send this letter?
Well, I assume the call later was, "Hey, Pence is coming."
Beware.
We got to work on our Trump accent. That's on our to-do list.
Yeah, maybe he sent Pence because he's going to bring in the threat of electroshock therapy into the discussion. Yeah,
do you think that's more effective than a 3-story building?
Pence is his enforcer.
Oh, I got you.
Careful, or you might change your sexuality with electroshock therapy.
Let's probably do that story on Saturday. They just had like a big thing in the some state had a big Supreme Court decision on that this week.
Oh, you're not allowed to shock people until they become less gay?
Yes. Which means you, sir, are in violation.
I think they're just gonna say they're straight, so you stop shocking them. Please, just stop shocking me. I'm straight now. Okay, just no more.
Hey, some people that's a kink, so Triumvirate says, "Zap me, daddy."
All right. So on Wednesday night, Syrian forces rolled into the strategic border town of Kobani, blocking the path of the Turkish military. And on Thursday,
Vice President Mike Pence announced, that's today, Pence announced that the United States reached a ceasefire agreement with Turkey to suspend its military operation in Syria for 4 days. And that will allow the Kurdish forces to retreat from the designated safe zone, which it would seem as though Turkey may have gotten their buffer zone promised, the buffer zone that they promised to themselves in return for allowing the Kurds to evacuate. So that's kind of the deal was, all right, Kurds, you're not going to get to keep your land. Sorry, sucks to suck. But we will not just slaughter you indiscriminately for 4 days. So it's maybe not a win, but maybe not a loss either. So,
yeah. So, again, I think this is a way that the U.S. was able to influence the conflict and stop the needless loss of life and genocide along the border by using our economy as leverage.
That's been a wonderful... It's been a very interesting strategy that Trump has used a few other times where it's been... Because last week, we were looking at, all right, either the U.S. is going to have to go to war with Turkey, and God knows what that looks like, or we're going to have, 1 million Kurds get slaughtered and it'd be a genocide. And Trump somehow always pulls out of his ass some kind of third option that involves, using America's natural resource of a just locomotive of an economy just barreling through there. And as soon as we put the screws on that spigot just a little bit to any one country, they jump as high as we tell them to jump. And so this was a great third option that Trump opened up for us.
Yes. So using our economy is the non-lethal way of applying influence, whereas we could have applied influence by moving in, a military force and firing missiles and dropping and doing airstrikes and killed a bunch of people. And it may have worked, may have not. Could have also escalated to a far larger conflict. However, the non-lethal influence was able to stop the conflict, I would say, more effectively. Now, I think that the Kurds and the Syrian government, if they need to fight for their own land here, we can't be the world's policeman. We can't fight for every country and every one of their conflicts. And if we were fighting this conflict, we're fighting in a divided Syria anyways. We'd be allies with half the country and the enemy of the other half. So that's not our conflict. They need to defend their own selves. We're not helping the Turks. In fact, we're hurting the Turks for attacking them. So we're helping out Syria, but we don't have to do it with military force.
Yeah, and to the extent that it doesn't go beyond that region of the world, or it's not threatening, global energy infrastructure, and that's just how it is. Some people might think it's a little blunt to say it like that, but that's the truth of it. To the extent that it's not affecting anything outside that region, it's not up to us. It's one, it's not right, but it's two, it's just not possible for us to pick winners and losers. There's these types of border conflicts happening all over Africa that we're not involved in.
Yeah.
The only reason why we're involved in them over here, to the extent that we are, is because it's energy infrastructure, and everybody can have their opinion on whether or not that's the right thing to do. But that is, for better or worse, that is the reason. But we need to make sure that we're not going beyond that reason, that it's not just picking a winner and a loser.
We can disagree or be opposed to a military conflict, one side or the other, and we can have influence over that conflict by using our economy. But it doesn't mean that it's our fight just because we have an opinion about it and we think it's wrong or it's morally wrong, right? Yeah. It doesn't mean it's our fight. And I say that because I have a high value of what an American life is worth, right? Yep. An American life to me is very valuable, and it can only be spent in warfare for a legitimately high cost. And for me, maintaining influence in that region with no actual gain towards our national security, that's not worth it. And now a lot of other countries around the world would say, yeah, American troops should be there because they don't value our lives. And it's not their skin in the game. And, in the Democrats, they're like, yeah, our guys should be the tripwire, the sacrifice for political gain. Well, they obviously don't value American lives as much as I do.
Well, and it's very obvious that they don't. This is not the first time that's come up that they've discussed the military in terms of equipment as pieces to be moving around. That's not the first time that they've done that, and I really like the idea of the new future strategy being economic warfare first. Again, I think it's the Democrats kind of see our economy as something that, one, needs to be destroyed as quickly as possible, and two, maybe be redistributed to the quote-unquote masses. They see it as something that they can use to destroy what they don't like about Western society. Whereas I do like the idea of Trump being able to use it, or whoever's president. This will set a nice precedent for the future presidents to be able to use that economy as a tool to avoid military conflict. I think that's far better. I would much rather see some of Erdogan's cronies not be able to buy that extra steak because they got their American bank accounts locked up, as opposed to spending about probably a couple thousand times whatever those sanctions cost us, probably about a couple thousand times that amount to go send off soldiers to die, and God knows what reason.
Yeah. Um, also, speaking of the European powers and how ineffectual they are, another reason why this orderly evacuation of the Kurds is important is because the Kurds actually had thousands of ISIS prisoners that they were holding on to. And if they were overrun and defeated by their military, their militia was defeated by the Turkish military, it could have meant that these ISIS fighters could have gotten free, right? And so this is going to allow for those prisoners to be moved and secured elsewhere. But there's one important thing to note is why do we have those thousands of ISIS soldiers still being detained by this militia? And it's because a lot of them are foreign fighters from Europe, from those Western countries
They don't want them back.
That Western countries have refused to take back. And then and so
again,
Trump
that
has been,
seems like something that should have been an EU problem. Let's, these are EU, expats of the EU. Let's why doesn't the EU come down and set up a prison system and keep them there? That's why I'm asking this rhetorically, but I always ask why, and I know a lot of people do. Why is it always America's problem? Why is it America's problem that the EU has citizens that want to go fight for ISIS in such numbers that, I mean, you're talking, what was it, like 10,000 plus? That's
yeah, you know what they should do? These ISIS fighters, they committed crimes in the European countries. They also committed crimes by fighting against the Syrian government and the Kurdish government, right? They have their own regional government. So why aren't they being tried in the Syrian and Kurdish courts, which would, by the way, have come with a death penalty? I think instead of keeping these people alive in prisons for a long time, you just follow the law of the area. You can save a lot of money because it would cost you as much as the cost of one bullet per prisoner. Problem solved. No one to return.
There you go.
And that's just following their legal system. You broke a law in their country.
Well, and
by trying to overthrow it.
To the extent that I even believe that Syria has a court system, I don't know if I buy that. But I'm sure that whatever that is
it's a village elder that just rules over them.
Which is, I mean, that's what ISIS was. That's what they were trying to go for. That's what, we've talked about this before. Is you to a certain extent you deserve what you're advocating for. This gets close to that line when you're talking about death penalty type stuff, but it's, that those are the systems, the legal system that ISIS was fighting for, and maybe they should go see what that's like.
I don't actually want the ISIS fighters to return to Western countries, because when they do, they return to Canada and are given millions of dollars for being ISIS fighters.
Yeah, so they're very oppressed.
Or they go to jails where they live a life far more cushy than they deserve for trying to fight against their country's soldiers.
We don't need that anymore in the prison system than it already is. That's that's one of the biggest. And that's not. People can not like this fact, but it is a fact. The after birth, the second largest place of conversion or entrance into Islam is via prison. The first is via birth. The next is conversion while you're in prison. And we don't need any more people over there spreading an even more aggressive form of that.
Yeah. So I think they should come back, but they definitely shouldn't just be kept alive in these camps. Indefinitely.
Again, EU, what are you doing? You got all this stuff. You got this huge body, just like the UN. Because again, it's everybody wants to say that's a human rights crisis. Well, we've got an international body that deals with human rights crisis. Where are they? The EU. These are their citizens, or they were. Where are you guys at? We've got NATO, where there's half the people involved with this are in NATO, and NATO doesn't have anything to say about it either, which I would imagine it's kind of awkward when NATO tells us something, because it's probably us telling ourselves, and paying for ourselves to tell ourselves. That's got to be awkward. But it's that goes to the there's part of the discussion of that was being had over the last few weeks about this was Trump has been very harsh on NATO and the UN and the EU. Anytime there's a big conglomerate of countries pretty much not doing anything with their big conglomerate, Trump is out there talking down about them because they are massively ineffectual. They are just not effective groups. That none of them are. And he's very much called out NATO several times, and this is definitely one more on the list of him being right about NATO being completely ineffective. But the Democrats have come back and said, even critiquing NATO, that is a threat to world peace and all.
Oh,
this
so
stuff.
they're beyond criticism. They can't do anything wrong ever. So what? No, you should. Okay, just like you should want to be able to have the right to criticize your president or your government, this is another government body, is it not? So to hold your government accountable, it's okay to criticize Trump. So in the same vein of logic, it is okay to criticize the UN or NATO. Yeah. And if they say it's wrong to criticize NATO, then they shouldn't be criticizing the president, you hypocrites.
Well, and that's the other thing too. Is I believe Nancy called NATO the fabric that has held the world together since World War II, and so she said that, and at the same time, just this week she wants Trump to go to war with Turkey, who's a NATO ally, and it's so, and that's the thing, and so Trump's been calling out these quagmire super alliances for a while now, and the Democrats like to pretend that he's a warmonger when he just solved, maybe it wasn't the perfect solution, but I don't think that there is a perfect solution for this, but
there was no solution. There's no victory here.
He did come up with a solution that did not require us to go to war, and it didn't require a massive genocide of the Kurds, and the Democrats still wanted him to go to war about it. And so it's really... Obviously, it's Orange Man Bad policy. That's why it's not coherent. I don't know why I keep trying to figure out what the logic behind it is, but I keep falling into that trap. So maybe you guys cannot do that, but don't.
So you can criticize the tact, okay? You don't like it, but let's look at the two outcomes. So had we stayed and fought expanded the military operation and fought the Turkish army, we would have not had a ceasefire. We would have had, because our troops would have been killed, we would have killed more. We would have engaged more. We would have fired missiles and done airstrikes. Lots of people would die, and the conflict would have been drawn out. Way more Kurds would have died. Civilians would have died, and it would have been extremely bloody and could... Even the best case scenario with that course of action would have been very bloody. The worst case, though, would have been us going into conflict with a near peer adversary, as well as, even if it wasn't Russia, us going to war with Turkey is still a sizable army. It's 13th largest in the world. It would have required the deployment of the vast majority of our military assets to defeat. Right.
And let's be real honest about this too. Is as terrible as that sounds for people on the ground, not in the high castle of DC. The only thing that the Democrats that Pelosi was looking at this was, I guarantee you, she was just drooling over the thought of being able to call Trump a warmongering war criminal. He wants to go to war. He's bombing brown countries. Even though she was the one who was calling for it, they would have flipped within a week, and this would have been part of the impeachment saga. Would have been war crimes.
This still will be. They'll say that we turned on our allies, and that's further corruption. It doesn't matter what he does. It's going to always be bad. It's always going to be a crime. It's not actually a crime. And it doesn't matter if what they're advocating for is far worse. So look at the two outcomes. Outcome, what they're asking for would have been worst case or best case scenario would have been extremely bloody. Trump's outcome resulted in a very quick resolution to the conflict and a peaceful withdrawal to prevent a genocide. Even though it is not the best case, like, yes, the Kurds are losing territory, but the Kurds are not getting genocided, right? So
Exactly.
Trump's solution was by far the least bloody of the two options, right?
And I didn't hear any proposals for other than let's just go to war. Well, with who? Well, just go to war. Other than
The
that,
NATO
like,
ally.
yeah,
What
other
would
than
that mean?
there was nobody had any specific ideas. Nancy didn't come out with a specific idea. None of the current DNC candidates came out with a specific idea, even though they've easily could have. CNN hasn't come out with a specific idea. I mean, they could have asked that at the debate on Tuesday night, and that among the slate of absurdly boring questions that they did ask. I mean, that would have been a heck of a question. Well, what would you do? What would you do in Syria? Would you go to war with a NATO ally over the Kurds? As you just laid out, the two obvious solutions that we had before us last week were a very bloody war that would have drawn us into probably another generations long conflict, or a pretty thorough genocide of a whole group of people, which nobody was rooting for that. Everybody. The Democrats were saying, well, you need to go to war, or if you don't go to war with Turkey, that means you want the Kurds to die, and it's probably because they're brown. And there was nobody was calling for that. Nobody was supportive of what Turkey was doing, but you gotta pick your battles. You can't you can't send out the blood and treasure for every single whatever whim it was, and it was obviously very political why the Democrats wanted Trump to do that. And I think that the solution was remarkably unexpected. It was extremely quick. It was as peaceful as was possible. Nobody's happy, and I think that's usually a sign of a good deal if nobody's happy. That usually means that there was some compromise. But he's likely saved in the millions of Kurds. That's quite an accomplishment, and we didn't have to fire a single missile over it. And I was watching Pence announce this earlier today, and it was funny. I texted Dyer about it, and I was like, I just described it the way I just did. There's a very amazing solution that we've come up with. Not a perfect one, but a pretty interesting one. And I just can't wait to find out exactly how this is going to be orange policy bad. Trump figured out the best possible solution in a bunch of worst case scenarios, and I'm sure that they'll find some way of making it Orange Man bad. And I was rewarded with my anticipation almost immediately. Right after Pence got done speaking, the media started going with two different takes on it. First, it was Trump abandons the Kurds again because he didn't go to war, and so they're calling it him abandoning the Kurds again because now the Kurds have to evacuate their lands, which again, that sucks, but that's better than going to war, and it's better than them getting slaughtered.
And this is not the end state. Like, we still have the pressure over them to say, hey, you are going to give back this land, or we will do these sanctions and so on and so forth. The rest of Europe can do the same thing. NATO can put pressure on them, say, hey, if you're not going to play nice with our, with other NATO allies, then you're out of NATO. Then there's so much pressure we can put on them to undo what they've done.
Again, the
this
UN.
is not over.
Yeah, again, the UN could come out there. The second take that somebody from the media asked Pence, which I am very concerned about what I'm about to say. What this journalist asked Pence, because I'm very concerned that this will become the new narrative next week. Right. And she, it wasn't even really a question. She just accused Pence of the Kurd of using the sanctions to blackmail Turkey into protecting the YPG, the Kurd terrorists. And so that's going to be, I'm concerned that will be the new take within the next week, will be that this wasn't this wasn't a good thing that saved the Kurds. This is actually, the Kurds are bad now, and Trump saved a bunch of terrorists, and he used the U.S. economy to blackmail a NATO ally into protecting terrorists. They're flipping it just that quickly, and I hope I'm wrong about that. But that is what I'm concerned will be the story next week. We'll see if I'm right or wrong on that.
It wouldn't surprise me. And then we would just play all the clips of them saying how great the Kurds are, how they're angels, next to them then claiming that they are the terrorist, which I mean, again, it's not white or black, it's shades of gray. Is no one in that region has clean hands, and when we go there, our hands just get dirty too.
Well, and that's part of the that's part of the problem I was talking about earlier. Was it's so complicated over there, and the media cannot be bothered to give any context, any history on it, and what that makes it makes it this complicated thing, and you just have to defer to whatever the media is telling you about it, and so they can say whatever they want about it. This week the Kurds are the angels and Trump's abandoning them. Next week the Kurds are the devil and Trump is blackmailing our allies to protect them. And they can just keep flipping it back and forth because nobody really has a good, again, America does not have a good understanding of what that region is like, because you realistically need like an 8-year doctorate in the Middle East and theology to have any chance of understanding what's going on over there. We can go through the light basics, but it's very likely a lot of you listening to us now, the few scraps that we've given you of information about the various groups over there, you're going to forget that in a week, and it's going to be back to a mess of confusion for you. And that's not your fault. It's just It just is what it is. But you got to be cognizant that the media is going to exploit that for every bit that it's worth, and they will be exploiting that against Trump.
Yeah. There's one aspect to this whole conflict that I think you touched on, but we should definitely highlight one more time for the show, is that NATO and Europe, their militaries have been subsidized by the U.S., and the U.S. has been made to be the global police force that goes and fights other people's wars. And we're currently deeply invested in the Middle East in general because Europe is dependent on that power source. They need the oil, they need the natural gas, and if they don't have access to it in the Middle East, if that place is unstable, then their economies struggle. Then they are not devoting the military assets to defend their own interests, right? They're demanding that not only does America provide their troops and their technology and all their resources, but also subsidize their military that they're not using by giving them money, military aid that is not being used to fight for their own interests. So how about, if this is such a big deal, how about they fight this war, not us?
Well, and they can, them fighting this war would just be utilizing I deign to call it an investment, but the money that we flushed down the NATO toilet, that did land in their armies that they could use to do something about this. There's a lot of there's 28 people in NATO. You got France, you've got Spain, there's a whole bunch of countries in Europe. I mean, you can pretty much name any country in Europe, they're probably in NATO, and they all got an opinion on America and what we're doing over there when they're just sitting on their asses over there. And one of the things I was, we were talking about earlier this week, Dyer, was I asked you just to make sure that I was understanding it correctly, because Turkey's in NATO and we fund more than 80% of NATO, and we are subsidizing the protection of all the NATO countries. Turkey is able to build up their own military in the way that they want to, and they don't really need to focus on their own protection because we're subsidizing that. So they're able to build a larger military force to go do whatever they want to do with it, and they don't really have to focus on their own protection as much because we're subsidizing that. And then the Kurds, we just spent the last 10 years arming and training them to great expense to us, and we were just looking at a potential war between Turkey, who we've subsidized their military, and the Kurds, who we've subsidized their military, and then we would have been in between, also fighting, I guess, against and with all the people that we've just paid for. So it would have been pretty much just a gigantic war that we paid for. The American taxpayer has paid both sides of, and to no benefit to them whatsoever. And I better buy some stock in whoever makes missiles, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, nervous laughter because it's true.
I know it's true.
That on its own is a reason for Trump to get out of there. Again, he could have one of his options was to just leave and let it happen. He stayed in the sense that he stayed diplomatically. And he stayed diplomatically, and that, thank you for the lemon Pontiac GTP. He stayed in the sense that he stayed diplomatically, and he did, to an extent, resolve the immediate situation very well. But he could have just pulled out. He could have just left it the way that it was. And because of what I just described, because of the way that the money is set up, the way that the alliances are set up, he needed to get out of there. But he did go the extra step to make sure that it was a little bit cleaned up. But that doesn't, just because there was going to be a problem there, does not mean that we needed to be there. I think for all the reasons I just listed, we needed to get out of there as quickly as possible.
Yeah. So we did spend a lot of time on this particular show defending Trump's actions, but there's lots to criticize as well. Like the fact that we're still in the Middle East in the first place, and really serving very little purpose where we're applying our soldiers. I mean, there's things that we do have legitimate interest in the Middle East, like Iran, and he's dealing with Iran in non-lethal ways by putting economic pressures on Iran to change their behavior. And when they take military action, we are justified in taking military action against, say, when they're attacking commercial shipping, right, through the Straits of Hormuz. We are justified in taking military action to defend against military action. But so there are some things we can be doing in the area. But our soldiers sitting in Iraq and Afghanistan, that's unnecessary. Let those countries fend for themselves. Let them, don't have a government that just exists because of us. Because we're not going to be able to change the culture. They need to change their own culture, and if they want to become more Western, that's got to be their decision, not us, not forced upon them. Because they're actually, us being there trying to enforce Western culture is actually more of a barrier to it ever happening. Because they're going to be fighting against it because it's an outside force forcing it upon them.
Yep, I don't disagree there, Catman. That could be a good solution. That's the simple solution.
Yeah. So if you guys are watching us on YouTube right now, and 12 of you are currently watching us on at least one of the channels, please come over to DLive, which I will, I think is already linked below. It is, goddamn, it's not linked below. So I'm going to link it right now.
Dyer, you have one job in the producing step, and it is to update the links.
That is true. I had one job, and I didn't do it. I failed. Do you guys
see what I have to work with every day? Jesus.
Okay, so I just updated it. So if you refresh your page, you'll see that there is now a link for DLive. YouTube can get rid of us at any point because they don't like us talking about stuff like this. The truth in general. So if you'd like to be able to watch us even when YouTube eventually bans our channel, please follow us on DLive, where they are not threatening to kick us off because we talk about the wrong topics, or they don't suppress our videos because of the wrong topics. So please follow that link below. Come and follow us on DLive. Also, we are also on BitChute and Twitch. Yep. So we have lots of options, so you guys can keep following us even when the eventual banning from YouTube comes.
Yes, and I now have enough monitors to monitor all the chats. So and I did notice that I did see some of you guys were adding me and Dyer. I did see those. I know you sent me something, Shadow Wolf. So I agree with you, but I didn't have time to say something. But we will try to be more active in all the chats going forward.
Can you please pull up that other map? There it is. The one that's the Syrian one with all the colors. Yeah, thank you.
The map that was already up.
Sorry, I had an old screen up. So that map there, I just pet peeve here with like any map you're using for like showing military movements and installations and stuff like that, right? Don't use blue. Don't use blue to show any one of the fighting forces.
It looks like water.
It looks like water.
Syria's flooded. It's global warming. The conflict doesn't matter. I did think that is weird because the river is the exact same shade of blue, and then is that a lake? Or is that like up here? There's like little spots. Are those lakes or are those part of Syria? Is this thing up at the top? Is that a river or is that part of Syria?
Syria does have other waterways that's within the area that's currently the Syrian government, but you can't see it because it's covered all the same shade of blue. So I know this probably doesn't matter to any of you, but that really bothered me.
You would think that the BBC, a company based on a giant island, that they might be cognizant of being able to delineate water on a map.
There are other colors.
Are you sure it's
not just blue, green, orange?
Actually, I
orange,
heard as part of the Brexit deal they lost the rest of the colors. These are the only
Damn
ones
it.
they can use.
Can't import other colors anymore.
Yeah, it was fancy cheeses and colors.
Okay, I think it's so hilarious that when I was deployed, I got a lot of the British news. They have their own like military radio set up there on a U.S. base for some reason. I know we have other nationals at the base, but still, why don't we have any U.S. news radio? Why has it got to be all British? Anyways, that's the side point. So their news is horrible. And it was so much fear mongering about like constantly, like every news show they had included fear mongering about Brexit and how it was going to lead to Armageddon for Britain, right? And they're like, oh, we currently get like 30% of our food from the rest of the EU. So obviously, when we break off from the EU, we're just gonna not have that 30% of food anymore. Or here's a crazy idea. Maybe you'll just buy it with different contracts, new deals, not the bad deal you guys were being forced to take. You guys were being forced to pay more than the stuff was actually worth because you're subsidizing the rest of the EU. What's preventing you from buying from other countries? Actually, the EU deal was limiting who you could buy from. So actually, you could have more food in your stores for a lower price if you're not in the EU, and that whole line of fear-mongering was moronic. Oh, if we break off with the EU, now no one who is currently in our country with a valid visa will be able to stay here. We'll have to kick them out immediately. Or how about you just issue visas like usual and enforce them like usual?
But Dyer, that's racist.
Oh my god.
Did you see that like parody of like a breakup that the BBC put out?
Yes, I watched it. It was hilarious.
That was so funny.
Did that.
Yeah, a lot of the Brits were very surprised that the BBC did that. I think the BBC knows which way the waters are going. And
yes, I think so.
They're about to flip. Oh, we were with Brexit the whole time. Oh.
Yeah.
We might link that for the next show. I assume that on Saturday we'll talk about Brexit.
Yeah, we should do that. The funny thing is all of their arguments against Brexit are based on the assumption of if you do away with the current plan, there'll just be no plan. Not that you can have better plans. There'll just be nothing, right? Mm-hmm. No. Just because one plan is done away with doesn't mean you can't have individual agreements with other countries or even with the EU. If the EU, because EU is the one that's losing out here. They're losing out on a huge part of their economic exchange, right? Mm-hmm. They need the British economy. So if the Brits had, actually negotiated with half a brain cell, they could have negotiated from a position of strength. You want to do trade with Britain. You guys will suffer economically without us. So we're leaving, whether you want us to or not. And we'll buy food from somewhere. And it could be from you if you give us a good deal.
Well, the funny thing is, so Britain's like, oh no, we're going to lose like 30% of our food. We'll probably just starve to death. But like the other side of that is somebody in Europe is losing 30% of the British food market. That's a big market. Jeez. That's gotta be also
that food is at a higher price. They're being charged. They were able to charge the Britons more than that food is worth locally.
And the pound is no slouch on value. That's not too bad of a currency to get paid in, especially compared to the euro.
Yeah.
So, well, We'll pick that up on Saturday. I was a little bit off topic, but I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Any closing shots on Syria here, or maybe closing sanctions? I don't know if I want to say shots.
I think that I think it's going the right direction. I don't like that we're having all this second guessing of every single little step in this maneuvering, because it's this isn't the end of it. We might actually have a far better outcome in a week from now. We're in the middle of a tense and complicated situation, and it doesn't help them when the Democrats are calling for us to let's just go to war.
The other thing with this too, kind of the subtext to this, is the really uphill battle that Trump has in dealing with foreign affairs. A lot of this was based in it looks like some kind of relationship, or at least a personality exchange with Erdogan to get this going, to kind of lay the foundation for this, and then also utilizing the economy as well, as we talked like earlier. But to do that, Trump needs to be able to discuss and talk freely with other world leaders and be able to tell them in no uncertain terms certain things that he's going to do or not do. And it's interesting that the transcript that was leaked of his calls with Ukraine, that was leaked by a intelligence whistleblower, because they thought that Trump was going to hurt the ability of the U.S. to engage in, I guess, foreign policy. But what that leaker did, because he was not a whistleblower, he was a leaker, he was far more damaging by leaking those calls than to what Trump is able to do in the world, to America's position in the world. Because now Trump is trying to be talking with Erdogan, and Erdogan's probably thinking in the back of his head, well, this is going to get leaked next week. This is going to be, my whole transcript with Trump, so that's going to be part of an impeachment trial. And so that is a huge, huge problem. And it is entirely caused by the Democrats. It is entirely caused by the deep state intelligence apparatus. And they are, I'm blowing the whistle on them. They are causing America real harm and very much hurting our position in the world, and hurting Trump's ability to be able to do things like this, to be able to come up with peaceful, non-military solutions to these world problems. That's a huge problem. That is a huge issue.
Yeah. I want to do one last pitch. If you're watching us on YouTube, please come over to DLive, where we won't be censored, and give us a follow. I very much would appreciate that. Other than that, though, we will be ending the show here in a second. We're going to be going to, I'm going to empty the chest. So let's get that chest emptied.
Ooh. You're going to reveal the chest? Are you going to reveal the chest?
Who wants to see my chest? The contents of it therein. Sorry, the giveaway is too much close to your last one. What?
What's that mean?
Sorry, this giveaway is too close to your last one. Please wait and try again later. The fuck?
When's the last time we gave away the chest?
I don't think it's been I think it's been a while. Okay.
We'll distribute in 1 second. It's distributed them. Look
at
followers. Triumvirate got 17. Shadow Wolf got 10. Shit Meme Dank Post got 8. I got 6.5. That's probably collusion or something. Timber got 5.6. Congratulations.
Cool. All right. So we'll see you guys on Saturday for the weekly news recap, where we'll go over all the news from the week, except for Syria, because we just covered it. Unless there's a big update, possibly.
Yes,
thank you all for the donations. Thank you for being engaged. We love talking with you guys, and we'll see you on Saturday. Direwolf out.
He's signing off.